time, so I think we can move towards the next slide where we will move towards the introductions from our end. I'm going to ask my colleague Veronica to kick off the introductions from our end.
Thank you, Robert, and hello, everyone. It's great to be in this webinar today. Thank you so much for joining. We hope it's going to be super useful for you and your EcoVadis journey. I'm Veronica Peserico, Italian. I'm a junior ESG facilitator at Nexio. I joined the company a year and a half ago already. My background is in business administration and corporate sustainability, and now I work mostly with clients from Italy and from the US.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Robert Smith. I'm the commercial lead or the sales lead at Nexio Projects. Working for the company a little bit more than 2 years now. Mostly also focusing on the US market, the European market, and hosting today's webinar with regards to the EcoVadis questionnaire. Some of you will see a familiar face. I host also the last EcoVadis series of the webinars that we have done in 2021. So let's jump into the agenda of today of the topics we're going to cover. First, we're going to deep dive into our point of view, which is really who we are as Nexio Projects, our partnership with EcoVadis, but also our point of view with regards to the methodology to kick it off. Then Veronica will guide you specifically through the EcoVadis model. How does the methodology work? How do we see the different insights with regards to the EcoVadis questionnaire? Some best practices from our side, and obviously we're gonna end again with a live Q&A where we will answer. We try to answer all of your questions with regards to your EcoVadis assessment, but mostly these are more questions than we can handle in the time that we have. But obviously we will try our best towards the end of the webinar. So our point of view. Let maybe start with some insights about Nexio Projects. So Nexio Projects, international sustainability consultancy firm located in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. We have 4 main buckets of services that we offer towards our clients and partners around the world, which is more on strategy development, climate change, ESG reporting, and different ratings and certifications, such as obviously EcoVadis. We walk the talk, as we say. We have done the EcoVadis exercise ourselves as well. And Nexio was rewarded with a platinum EcoVadis medal with 79 points on the EcoVadis platform in 2021. And obviously working this year again on the reassessment also from our side. So we have been through the process ourselves already for a couple of years, and we know where the bigger challenges are lying with regards to filling in the questionnaire, understanding your scorecard, etc. So just on the number side, in 2018 we partnered with EcoVadis. This means that we, as their certified and global support partner, have unique insights in the methodology, how they want your company's results reflected in the EcoVadis questionnaire. And in 2020, we became the only global partner of EcoVadis, where we support companies not only in Europe, but also now more and more towards the United States, for example. This brings me to the next slide. So before we deep dive into the best practices of the questionnaire, we have some insights on the performance and scores on each pillar. So in 2020, EcoVadis did an analysis on 72,000 ratings. And what we see here is that the smaller and medium-sized companies are taking the lead in the overall performance, which is obviously an interesting insights on so many companies who went through this rating in 2020. What do we see as well? We see that there's an overall lack on sustainable procurement, which is obviously one of the most challenging pillars within the EcoVadis platform and overall within sustainability. And that small, medium companies perform best on labor and human rights. Furthermore, we see larger companies having the biggest impact, obviously, on the environment and scoring there better than the small and medium companies. Before we deep dive into the specific EcoVadis model together with Veronica, we want to start today's webinar, as I already mentioned in the beginning, with a poll, where I'm going to launch the poll. And the question is, what brings you to today's webinar? Obviously, you can answer, select multiple answers as well from your end. So the poll is live, where we see the different answers that you can give. I'm preparing my first EcoVadis assessment, preparing our reassessment. So already done an assessment and now working towards the reassessment. I want to know more about EcoVadis general. I want to know more about Nexio Projects and how we can potentially support. I am looking for support on the EcoVadis assessment or any other topic that brings you to today's webinar. Obviously, you can also mention it in the chat box towards Veronica and myself. I see still some answers coming in. Where 95 people already voted, so that's moving towards the higher end, where we have now currently live 135 people joining us. So I'm going to give it a couple of more seconds. I will share the results. What we see here is a lot of people are preparing already for their reassessment, and are overall here to know more about EcoVadis. So it's great to have you all here, and still seeing that people who are already doing this assessment are still willing to improve and learning, and not only ticking the EcoVadis box, but also are here to learn towards their reassessment. So I'm gonna hand over the word towards you, Veronica, where we deep dive a little bit more into the EcoVadis model.
Thank you, Rob. Indeed, it's great to see that a lot of you are already using EcoVadis, but also that a lot of people are interested in EcoVadis and understanding how it works. Indeed, what we think is that it's good to have a good understanding of the methodology, as that really helps you then tackling the questionnaire in the best way. What we will do now is to walk through the EcoVadis model and the methodology to then explain how the questionnaire is built and how you can best address it. So in this slide, you see that those are the 5 steps of EcoVadis. So we're gonna take a closer look to each of them as we go through the webinar, but just for the beginning, it all starts with the registration, of course. After that, you get your questionnaire that you're asked to fill in. After the questionnaire is submitted, an analyst from EcoVadis or more will take a look at your questionnaire and the documents that you have included, and then you will get your results and also the recognition. So starting from the first part is indeed the onboarding process and the registration online. The registration online is crucial for EcoVadis because you will be already asked about your industry, about your location, your business activities, and all of this information will be taken by EcoVadis to make sure that they deliver the right questionnaire to you. So really tailor based on your size and on your industry. If you're already interested about how the questionnaire will look like, how EcoVadis works is that it's based on 4 pillars. So we have environment, labor and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement. Each of these pillars have what is called in EcoVadis language an activated criteria. For the ones of you who have already done a materiality analysis, you might recognize those as material topics. And that's what they are. So those are the topics that are most relevant for your industry based on EcoVadis knowledge and the research that they've done on your industry. Of course, here you see all of them, but this is not the case for all industries. Based on the industry, they might change. You might have more, you might have a bit less. So as you can see in the next slide, to give you an example, we have here 2 different industries. So we have logistics and we have consulting. As you can see on the transport side, environment has more activated criteria. Well, for example, on the consulting services side, there are more ethics criteria because it really changes based on the industry. But then if you're curious about knowing what your activated criteria are and also why EcoVadis chose some of the activated criteria and some not, you can then go into your EcoVadis account. That will be available as soon as you sign up for EcoVadis. And then as you see in the next slide, you just need to go through my performance, also on the left. And then after, right below your name, you'll see that it will be your industry. You can click on it. And there you have a list of key sustainability issues. They're also divided between medium or high priority and importance. And next to each activated criteria, there's a little arrow. If you click on it, EcoVadis will explain why that was selected as an activated criteria for your industry. And then already gives you a lot of insight on why some materials were chosen, why some were not. And this is really important because for each of those activated criteria, EcoVadis will ask you a set of questions. But this is, of course, just the beginning. Now we can move on to how the questionnaire is structured and also the methodology that is used. Of course, how the questionnaire is structured and the methodology used goes hand in hand. So once you open your account and you ask for a questionnaire, you will get the questionnaire, which is, as we say, tailor-based for you. So you will be sure that the questions asked are just based on your industry. You're not going to get any weird question. Let's say you don't produce anything, you will not get manufacturing question. But how the questionnaire is set is the same way as the approach that EcoVadis has. And this is the approach, the one you see in this slide. So it's the sustainability management system approach. For the ones of you already familiar with ISO, you might recognize that the structure is the same. So it's all started with policies, documents that allow you to set the expectation for certain pillar and the targets that you have worked on, as well as some guidelines. The policies then are, the next step will be, of course, the actions that you take to get to those targets that you have set in the policies. And finally, the reporting. So what is the success rate of the actions that you have taken and whether you manage to achieve your targets or not. So if we break this down, as you'll see that in the next slide, just to make it a bit more tangible, this is how it is also breakdown by EcoVadis, and those are the percentage of each pillar that you see. So policies, of course, covers, as I mentioned, those documents that allow you to have a clear vision on your sustainability, and especially on each pillar, that have the missions, the value statement, but also the objectives that you have set. With the policies are also the endorsement. So are you part of any industry initiative around sustainability? That will also count into policies. Then we move on to actions. So all the measures that you have in place to achieve the targets, but also the certifications that you have, for example, ISO certifications, and also the coverage. This is really important for the ones of you who are working on a group assessment. So when we're working on a group assessment, EcoVadis wants to see how are those actions carried out throughout your locations? What is the coverage of each of those actions in place? And then finally, we have the reporting and the 360 news. So the reporting, you can think of all the KPIs. If you have already, for example, a sustainability report, that's great. Or if you have an internal database where you keep all the KPIs that are relevant for your policies and for your targets. And then, of course, we have the 360 news. As you can see in the next slide, the 360 news watch is quite an important topic when it comes to EcoVadis, because it's the only item that can take points out of your final score. What is the 360? Basically, the 360 is the way that EcoVadis sees if the company was on the media for any bad news or for any good news. So for example, let's say that you have a location that just got a fine due to human rights issues, that will show up in the 360 and your score for labor might be a bit low. Or let's say that your company has just done an agreement with the WWF and that was published online, that will show up in the 360 and you might get extra points. Now, how many points you get, it really depends case by case. You can go from -5 to -15, and then you can go to +5. Also, it depends where to which pillar it includes. So if it's for sustainable procurement, the finding will be considered for 3 years, same for environment and labor and human rights. But if there's a fine, for example, on ethics, let's say there was an incident around bribery, then that will be on your EcoVadis score for 5 years. So that's really good to know that it's just not the year of your assessment, but it will continue to live on based on which pillar it works with. So then finally, to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of EcoVadis, what it really does is that it allows you to see sorry, Rob, is the next slide. Thanks. It allows you to see whether you're going from compliance to purpose, as we say at Nexio. So really see, are you just following the laws that apply to you? Or are you also taking a step forward and also looking at the overarching norms? So maybe working towards ISO best standards or the GRI report, but also are you taking then the next step and really make sure that you go to purpose, so that you have a purpose-driven business that goes beyond all the legal requirements and all the extra norms. So that was, of course, kind of the overarching method of EcoVadis, and then lately, a bit later, we will go into the best practice that we have seen for yourself, and the ones that you can put in practice as you prepare your next EcoVadis assessment. But then also, once you're done with the questionnaire, remember also that the questionnaire is document-based. So for each question, you need to upload the right document, because EcoVadis wants to check that that action is indeed in place, that you have indeed a policy for it. After that, everything else will be checked by an analyst from EcoVadis. So of course, EcoVadis is an independent tool that is, as I was mentioning, document-based. So the analyst will look into all the documents that you have uploaded and just make sure that indeed what you said as an answer to your questions is also true, and it can be found in the documents that you have used. And also the great question that everyone has is, of course, how long does it take for the score to be live? Now what we see is that it's usually 11 weeks, because indeed there's a lot of companies are going through the EcoVadis assessment. So the time is a bit longer than usual. So we always say around 11 and 12 weeks, that's where you can expect to see your scorecard with all the weaknesses and strengths and a better explanation of your score. But then, of course, once you submit your assessment, you will be able to see right away how long you will need to wait for the final scorecard. And then I think for the scorecard results, it will be Rob who will walk you through that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Veronica. Linked to your EcoVadis scorecard, there will obviously be the results that will come back from EcoVadis. And those results are translated in medals, as we will see in the next slide. We already highlighted it in the previous webinar together with my colleague Herman, but there has been a change from EcoVadis side on the ratings model on the medal side. So in 2020 there was a change in medals where we went from a minimum of 43 before was bronze to a shift of 45. And now since the 1st of January 2022, we made a change from 45 to 47, where the bronze medal starts. Same with silver from 54 to 46, and bronze has gold has gone 1 point up, and platinum as well with 2 points. One important note to mention here is that your score from 2021 will stay the same if you have, for example, obtained a score of 45, but no, for your 2022 assessment onwards, the scoring is a bit different, where the standards went up from an EcoVadis perspective. Obviously, if you have any questions with regards to the new medals from EcoVadis, please feel free to already write your question in the Q&A box. We see already that a couple of questions are coming in towards the end of the webinar, where we're going to answer them. So please don't hesitate to already write your questions on this slide or the previous slides that Veronica presented in the Q&A box. Which brings me to the next slide, where we are opening up a poll again on the question, which aspect of the assessment do you find the most challenging? The different questions the different answers that you can give in the poll are gathering the data. Obviously, an interesting one where EcoVadis has a very broad scope where you need to gather all the data from your internal key stakeholders, filling in the questionnaire itself, putting the correct policy and procedures in place, improving on our previous score, or any other points that you find the most challenging with regards to the EcoVadis assessment. I see still some answers coming in, so let's give it a couple of more minutes. Right, I'm gonna close the poll now. As we see here in the results, 34% answered gathering the data. Obviously interesting insights, Veronica, where we see that this is still something that companies are finding the most challenging. We see it obviously a lot as well with our clients, that structuring the data collection process is some of the most challenging parts of EcoVadis. And then also in correlation with filling in the questionnaire, obviously, since there are only 55 documents allowed in the EcoVadis questionnaire. And obviously also improving on our previous score is one of the most challenging parts of the assessment still. Thank you all for answering the questions. And we will move towards the next slide. See, yeah.
Nice, thank you, Rob. So that's great that we did this poll, and also it's not great that a lot of people are struggling with the gathering the data, but I think we can help with that, and actually was part of the best practice that I was about to present. So what we see as best practice in collecting the data, which we know it can be quite a big task, is the first one would be to have a project manager. So have someone who's in charge to oversee the whole EcoVadis assessment, and then can really oversee the whole process and make sure that all the different departments know exactly what they need to upload, they need to provide, and that they're on time. Of course, the project manager cannot do everything by himself or herself, especially for bigger companies. So we do believe that the best approach is to also have one responsible person per department. So for example, if you have environment, you can have one person that is responsible for the environmental department, who will be responsible for EcoVadis. They know exactly what documents are needed, and they know by which they're needed. So that's usually the best way to see it, is that to have the roles divided and really clear for everyone to follow. And then, of course, there's the group and then versus entity assessment. So for the ones who are working with a group, just make sure that the documents that you include are in the scope of the assessment. Or for daughter's company, you cannot use you can use the documents from your mother company, but just on policies and reporting. For action, those will not be accepted. So that's really important for you to know what documents you can choose from. And then when filling in the questionnaire, we always make sure to use the comment box, because the comment box allows you to explain your answer to the analyst. So for example, let's say that they ask for a specific training. In the comment box, you can say what the training is about, when it was handled, and what you have included as a proof. So you can say, for example, we conduct a yearly training on environmental issues, attach the presentation that we use in the last round of the training, and the attendance sheet.
Maybe Veronica, just to
yes,
add on that, I think also the point of the groups versus entity documents, also the comment box is absolutely useful for that one, to explain to the analyst of EcoVadis, if you as a specific entity, for example, are using a policy from the group, to make use of that comment box to explain towards the analyst of EcoVadis how this document is used within your entity, how it's implemented, because still a lot of documents, which is obviously a shame, are getting rejected by EcoVadis because, yeah, they don't see the context, or they don't understand how the specific entity is using this document from the group's perspective. So please also use the comment box for that one. I just wanted to add that on my side.
No, it's a great point. And actually, what I was saying is that indeed, if you're using, let's say, a policy from your mother company and you have a different name, please make sure to include that in the comment box, saying that indeed that's your mother company. Sometimes what we do is that we add a link to the website where it's clearly written that your daughter company of X company. So then EcoVadis can see the connection between the two companies right away if the name is different, which is most likely the case. And then for the ones who are working with the reassessment, what we believe is essential is that when you start the reassessment, take the time to go through your last assessment, see what the strengths were, what the weaknesses were, and check the documents. If the document is still good, there's no need to add additional documents, because as we said before, there's the maximum of 55 documents, but those are just the documents per year. If you have documents from the previous year that you can use again, you can use them and they will not add up in the 55 documents. So just be smart about it. Take your time to check your latest assessment, see what's there, what can work for the next assessment, and this will help you having more documents as of course that you can add, but also having less documents to collect around the company. And then of course check the reliability of your documents. Just make sure that those are documents that are in use. It's not old documents, because as we will see in a little while, those will not be included by EcoVadis. They will be rejected if they're too old. So just make sure that you select the best documents and the strongest document for the question that EcoVadis is asking. So if the link is not clear between the document and the question, that's a problem. So really make sure that you use a strong document and the comment box to make that link, to make that connection, so that it's clear right away for the EcoVadis analyst as well. And then continue on the documents. Of course, there are some documents that won't be accepted, and here we can give you a bit more guidance on that. So the first one will be, you cannot create documents just for EcoVadis. And I know that this is sometimes a problem for companies, because they say, no, but we have that action, we just don't have the document in place. Of course, you can work on that procedure throughout the year, but you cannot work on that procedure the week before EcoVadis, because they can detect when the document was created, and if it was created too close to the EcoVadis submission, it will be rejected right away. So also make sure that if you're including new actions, new policy, you take that into account in preparing your next assessment. And then the other one would be, as I mentioned before, obsolete information. So policies and actions that are older than 8 years will not be accepted, and KPIs and reporting that is older than 2 years will not be accepted. So also make sure that you keep an eye on the date of each document, so then no good documents will be rejected just for a date reason.
Maybe Veronica, to just
Yes.
go one slide back, also an additional point from my side. Obviously, there is sometimes also some confusion between implementing new documents and optimizing existing documents. So this is really about the creation of new documents. It is possible to optimize already an existing policy, for example, that you already have in place as a group or an entity. But this is really that EcoVadis can identify if the document is completely new created, purely a couple of weeks before the EcoVadis assessment. So optimization is possible, optimizing your existing training, your existing policies or procedures, but please be aware that it's not possible, unfortunately, to still implement a whole new policy, handbook, procedure, or again, a training just a couple of weeks before EcoVadis. But I just want to make clear the difference between then optimization and implementation.
Yes, so then the last few warnings, the first one will be that pictures are not allowed. So even if you have a certain machine in the company that, let's say, is particularly energy efficient, just taking a picture of that machine and sending to EcoVadis will not work. They always look for procedure more than other type of documents. And then, as we were mentioning before, just make sure that the documents that you provide are in the scope. So then they're really for your company and used by your companies, and not any other legal entities that are not linked to your company. And then, of course, plagiarism, EcoVadis has a sophisticated AI check for that. So that, of course, will be rejected. And again, as we mentioned before, the amount of documents, which is 55, And also keep in mind that if you include links instead of documents, that also counts in the 55. So indeed, links are not just free, let's say. You cannot get as many as you want, but they do count as a document. And then finally, for the main takeaways before we do a last round of poll, and then we also look into your questions, which I see a lot of really good questions that I cannot wait to tackle. The first one will be to be authentic. So just making sure that indeed EcoVadis is not just a tick in the box, but it is a good picture of your sustainability and your sustainability strategy and what you're trying to implement with your company and what your purpose is. And also making sure that you're well prepared. So for the person who's handling EcoVadis, but also for the team, making sure that everyone is on the same page, that they know exactly what they need to do, what type of data is needed, and what documents will be accepted. And also this goes with the preparation, have a good structure of your approach. And this also goes back to the first slide that I was mentioning about policies, action, and reporting. This is what EcoVadis is looking for, is your sustainability management system. So it not just can be all actions and no policies. It needs to be the base of your policies and targets, the action that you have taken to achieve those targets, and then finally the reporting on those targets, either internal or external.
Great, thank you very much. So the next slide, as Veronica already indicated, is again a final poll purely on, are there any support services that you're already looking for in the new year in terms of EcoVadis? So I'm going to launch the poll now. Yeah. See, the slides are a bit struggling. All right. See already the answers coming in. So you can choose between our gap analysis, where we identify the different gaps in your sustainability management system, and it can support you with prioritizing the different gaps in a sustainability roadmap. An EcoVadis assessment review, where we're gonna review your assessment before you submit your new assessment to make sure that the right questions are right documents are linked to the right questions, and that the most optimal score will be obtained. And same for EcoVadis assessment supports just overall guidance from the data collection to the submission. Maybe more specific on the carbon services, where we obviously have our climate change team, as I mentioned in the beginning, or any other support, please don't hesitate to let us know here in the poll. I see still some final answers coming in, and I will close off the poll now. Which brings me to the next slide. Is next up in our webinar series is our sustainability reporting series on communication, hosted by my colleague Cesar Carreño and Anja de Jager. So you can scan here the QR code if you already want to book your spot on the webinar. So I will give a couple of seconds to do that, and then afterwards we will jump into the live Q&A session to answer all your questions in the Q&A box, which Veronica already mentioned are quite a lot, and we are excited to dive into those questions and answer them for you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen actually. And the QR code is obviously here, but you can also register through our LinkedIn page. Where we're going to dive into the different questions that came in through the Q&A box. So let's see. I see already some couple of questions here. Maybe, let's see.
Rob, if you want, I can start with the group assessment question, because I know that that's a big topic.
Yeah.
So I saw that someone was asking about doing a group assessment, and that it's completely possible, but then that needs to be selected when you sign up for EcoVadis. If you sign up as a group, then the assessment will be on a group basis. And for the other person asking about how does EcoVadis validate the coverage of action, that's a great question. So that's actually the main difference between an entity assessment and a group assessment. When you do a group assessment, you'll see that you have the questions that we call coverage questions. So you see that apart from policies, actions, and reporting, you get those questions, and EcoVadis will ask, for example, what is the percentage of location that is that has a risk assessment for environment? And then there you need to give a percentage. How that is done is that usually you need to have a document that shows the coverage of these actions. So for example, a dashboard, and that allows EcoVadis to calculate the percentage of locations covered. And this is extremely important because it's a multiplying factor. So for the action, you will just, let's take environmental risk assessment. For the action, you would just need one document, but then for the coverage, that's where you will show how many locations are covered by that particular action, and that will be used as a multiplying factor by EcoVadis. Or the other example is that they will ask, for example, for ISO 45000, how many locations are covered by ISO 45000. And that will also give them an idea of the coverage of your questions. And that's how they will calculate your final score.
Great.
I hope that answered the question. Otherwise, just send another Q&A and I will try.
I see also a lot of questions still in the chat box, so please use the Q&A box for the questions. Obviously, we can also look into the chat box afterwards, but we will prioritize the questions in the Q&A box. So maybe Veronica, you can tick off the ones you answered with answered live in the Q&A box, and I will jump towards the question of Sophia, which is, can you explain again about the 55 documents and using the old documents again from the library? So is it possible to have 55 new documents every year and keep the old ones? So in every assessment, it is possible to have 55 documents in total. So what we meant is that you can look back at your previous assessment to see which documents you uploaded there and if you can reuse them for your reassessment. But again, in your reassessment, the total amount of documents, so the maximum amount of documents you can upload is again 55. But what Veronica meant is just also to be time efficient and not, again, contacting your HR colleague for all the evidence on labor and human rights, but please take the time to also look into the EcoVadis library, reflect back on the last year and see if there are still some types of evidence that you can reuse for this year's assessment. So overall, to answer your question, 55 documents in every assessment is the max.
Nice.
I can
maybe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yes, I wanted to ask.
You can tackle the next one. You can go
the first question by Vera, because she was asking, what does it mean when some questions do not allow for mother company documents? So those questions are usually the one on actions, as I was mentioning before. For policies and for reporting, you're allowed to use your parent company documents. So for those actions, you'll see that indeed, when you're doing the assessment, it does say that they're not credited, and it means that they won't be accepted. So you cannot score using your parent company documents for actions, because EcoVadis cannot know whether those actions are actually also taken in your company or just at a parent company level.
Great, thank you. Hope it answered the question. Let's see, from Clifford, I see an additional question, more on the practical side. Difference between the basic and premium subscription. With the basic subscription, you can tackle the questionnaire, but you cannot per se share your score with other companies within the platform. And this is possible with the premium subscription in EcoVadis. For the rest, very practical. On the website, there's also an overview with the two different tables where you can see the difference between the basic and the premium subscription. So I would definitely recommend to check this section out there on the EcoVadis website.
I saw there are a few questions about 360, which is always a big topic. Always the case for 360.
Yeah.
And indeed, someone is asking whether if the 360 was not on their company, but maybe a sister company with the same name, it doesn't apply. yes, I would suggest to contact EcoVadis through the help center and just let them know, explain the situation, and also show proof that indeed that does not cover your company, and therefore then it shouldn't be taken into consideration. It won't probably change your score for that year, but then it will not be included in the next assessment that you do with EcoVadis.
That's perfect. I see another question, maybe a nice one for you, Veronica, to answer from Marco Boscolo. A little bit on the lower side of the Q&A. In the last assessment, I used SAP screenshot to show that the registrations are managed in our SAP environment, but the document containing the screenshot was rejected by EcoVadis. How can I answer next time?
So that's a great question. So it really depends on the screenshot. So usually with screenshot, we suggest you download the page instead. So download the web page. In that case specifically, I think that it might be because there wasn't a link to your company. So EcoVadis could not see that the SAP was for your company. So just also make sure that in this case, there's always a logo on your company in the database. So then once you download it, it's clear for EcoVadis, the link between that web page and your company.
Right. I see also quite some points in the chat box on people who say their documents are getting rejected, even though they're only 2 years old, and it's confusing for them. Obviously, no, we are not the ones in the end who are reviewing your assessment, and there's always an opportunity to have a point of contact with your analyst if you have any doubts on the feedback from EcoVadis. So if you're 100% convinced that your document is still valid, you are using this policy, for example, internally, it's only 2 years old. Please don't hesitate to then reach out to EcoVadis, since there's always the opportunity to ask for additional feedback from the EcoVadis analyst.
And also to add on to that, something that maybe we didn't discuss before is that scans are not the best proof, and actually we suggest never to use scans in EcoVadis.
Yeah.
The idea is that you always want to use documents that they can easily copy paste. So scans are usually not the case, and also sometimes it's bad quality, so those get rejected quite often. So maybe that was the case for the policy. The other case that we see a lot is that indeed there's no logo, or the connection with the document doing with the company doing the assessment is not clear. So also maybe double check that before the next assessment. Yeah,
indeed. That's a good point. I see a question from Shai. Welcome, Shai, to today's webinar. In order to save uploads, can pages from our sustainability report can be shown and simply mark the pages in the question box? So with other words, can we just take certain pages from our sustainability report and upload them to answer the question in the question box? I think what we would recommend is not per se take out elements of a specific document, but more we would recommend to upload the document as a whole and to refer in the comment box to a certain section within the document that is answering the specific question that EcoVadis is asking, right, Veronica?
Yes, indeed. And I think also when you have those big documents, so for example, sustainability report, or let's say an employee handbook, that can be used in multiple questions, that usually a quick win, because indeed, then you don't get to the 55 limits, you use just one document. But indeed, as Robert was mentioning, make sure that you reference the right page. So then it's really easy for the analyst to find the right answer in those big documents. Yeah, 100%.
I'm scrolling to the different questions. Is there any specific one you see, Veronica, that you want to tackle?
Yes, I saw that Nina was asking how long policies and procedures are valid. In that case, it's 8 years. The 2 years rule is just for reporting of KPIs.
Yeah. I see another question from Casper Henke. Welcome, Casper. I see, is there a recommendation on language use within the assessment? Example, can a Dutch company provide answers in Dutch and refer to Dutch resources, even the questionnaires in English? Yes, this is possible. EcoVadis has a lot of languages available within the company, a lot of different options where you can submit your documents in. So it's good to double check if you're not sure on the EcoVadis website if your language is allowed as to upload documents in. But this goes very far within the EcoVadis company. But I know for sure, since I'm Dutch myself, we're working with quite a lot of Dutch companies. Dutch is a possibility to answer, to give your answers in.
So that Justine was asking about the KPI section of the assessment, if that is scored by EcoVadis. It is indeed scored. And actually, what you want to keep in mind for the KPIs and how it's scored is whether you have KPIs on all the activated criteria that I was showing at the beginning. So making sure that your reporting covers all the material topics that you have, that will get you to a higher score for the reporting side.
Yeah.
And for Vera, who doesn't have the access to the EcoVadis platform from the company, I would suggest indeed to contact EcoVadis through the help center, and I'm sure that they can figure out a way to indeed give you the account back, and you can enter your company's EcoVadis platform.
Yeah, indeed. Tackle the next one from Carla Matthews. What happens if the policy has been updated shortly before the assessment and is, for example, version 4? Will it still be accepted? Yes. So this is a perfect example of optimization. So you can optimize your policy shortly before the assessment, and it will still be accepted. So yes, Carla, you're all good to go with the optimization of your policy.
And I see we have a question from Ingo, who was asking about certifications and rating. If a company has certifications that are not mentioned in the EcoVadis questions, of course, those are taken into account because the ones that you have in the question are usually let's say, the most common across industries. So for example, ISO, but then for different industry, the certification might be different, but indeed we suggest to upload all the relevant certification per pillar that are important for your industry or that you have, and those will be scored by EcoVadis.
Yeah. I see also quite some, if I scroll back a little bit in the chat box, I see also quite some people commenting that they also want to know how to improve their score that they just obtained. So no, the topic of this specific webinar was purely on the questionnaire, and no, the next one in our EcoVadis series, which will be held towards the end of March, will be purely on understanding and mastering the EcoVadis scorecard and how to improve my score. So there was more on the questionnaire, and no, there's a next webinar coming up towards the end of March on how to improve your score.
And also I saw that there are a few questions on EcoVadis corrective action. So for the ones who have not done an EcoVadis assessment yet, once your score is live, EcoVadis will present you with the strength from your last assessment and also the corrective actions. So what we see is that usually corrective actions help the company see where the main gaps are. So for example, there might be comments on policies saying that policies are missing targets on some activated criteria, or that you're missing some important actions. So how we see that is that it really helps the company internally to work towards those corrective actions. Of course, in the EcoVadis assessment, you can also say that, well, the EcoVadis platform, you can also say that you're gonna work on certain corrective action, but that is a tool to help you guide your sustainability towards the new assessment and making sure that you tackle all the gaps that were there in the past assessment.
Yeah. I see also an additional question from Jose Luis. We already filled in the EcoVadis questionnaire, but we weren't able to upload all the documents on that specific time. Is it possible to improve the results of the questionnaire by uploading new documents in the following months? So know that EcoVadis is really measuring your sustainability performance at one certain point in time, and it is from looking at the original methodology of EcoVadis, it's a yearly assessment. So know that it's normal as a company to do the assessment every 8 to 12 months. So and also it will not improve your score if your scorecard has been published and you submit additional documents to the questionnaire. That's not going to work, and you really have to open a new questionnaire then from the EcoVadis end. And also payment-wise, renew your subscription, because it's really valid for 12 months actually, and then you have the chance to improve your score after that, if that answers your question.
So I saw that someone was asking about the type of documents requested for a company of 10 employees. So for extra small company, the questionnaire is quite different. So you get a lot less questions. So you see that indeed what is asked are maybe some big documents that anyways you might have in place, indeed some policy, some reporting, and then, for example, employee handbook. But you see that the questionnaire is not as extensive. It is quite a short questionnaire because it takes into consideration the size of your company and also what is expected from a company of that size.
Let's see. I saw some points also on EcoVadis and the environmental side for 2022. Know that there in almost every industry has been added some questions on an environment in every questionnaire for every industry. So know this is obviously a topic that EcoVadis is also tackling more and more, and that, as I said, in every questionnaire linked to every industry available in EcoVadis, additional questions have been added on the environmental side. Also, there's the new carbon tool within carbon action module is the official name within EcoVadis. So definitely also work in progress on the EcoVadis side, on the environmental and climate side.
And then I saw that Inga was asking about the date deadline for the documents for the 2022 assessment. So that really depends on when you sign up for EcoVadis. Once you sign up, you have a couple of weeks to submit the assessment. Once it's submitted, that will last for a year. So then after a year, the medal will not be valid anymore and you will need to go through another assessment. And then someone was asking about the 360 and what's the weight of the 360. So it can be +1, -5, -10, or -15 based on the case. And of course, based on the case related to how big the company is. So for example, a fine of $5,000 might be different for a small company and for a big company, of course.
Yeah, maybe an additional question for you, Veronica, is can I upload the same document multiple times to refer to multiple sections to answer the questions?
Yes, actually, that's a best practice indeed. If you have a document that covers multiple questions, we see a lot. For example, employee handbook might be useful, of course, for labor, but also for ethics. We do suggest to use the same documents and just make sure that the right paragraph is highlighted in the comment that the analyst can easily find it.
Perfect. I see we've tackled actually most of the questions. I think this is quite impressive, reflecting on the previous webinars where there were always more questions than time that we had. So I think we're going to round it off for today. We still have a couple of minutes left, so that gives everybody time to close off the webinar. And we want to thank you from our end for joining today. And please, if any additional questions are still rising in the coming hours, days, or weeks, please don't hesitate to reach out to Veronica or myself. We are absolutely happy to support you on that. But from my side, thank you very much for joining today's webinar.
Thank you. Have a nice evening or day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.